Hi, YouTube. I should probably be eating my lunch right now, like my dog just did. I guess he's probably the wiser of the two of us. But I wanted to see if I could get my thoughts out before they disappear. Like many, I watched Barack Obama's address about terrorism the other night, and I wanted to respond to a couple of things that were said there. I'd actually recorded a video last week in the same vein as this one, but there are new pieces, I think, to the puzzle that Barack Obama kind of alluded to during his address. And so I may or may not upload that video. It may stand on its own, or I may decide that it doesn't need to be uploaded. But I think as atheists, it's going to be up to us. Rationalists, empiricists are going to need to speak because there's a whole lot of crazy going on. Obviously, radical Islam, the Islamic terrorists, there's a lot of crazy going on there. And I've said this before, but I think it bears repeating that if you're going to suggest that a whole bunch of other people should live a certain way, or that you're going to impose certain things on them, like the removal of their heads and the smashing of their heads with rocks and other disconnections of themselves with their life force, and it's going to be based on an ideology, you damn well better be able to demonstrate that your ideology is a reflection of reality. And I think likewise, if you're going to impose your will on people in other regards, as to whether or not that they can form some kind of a government-recognized union, and many other, visit a loved one in a hospital, et cetera, et cetera. If you're going to do any of these things based on an ideology, you better be able to demonstrate that your religious ideology, for sure, is an accurate reflection of the nature of our existence. And if you can't do that, then I think we're going to have to pass on accepting your dictates. In Barack Obama's speech, he talked about perversion of ideology or perversion of religions. And that's the first problem. Islam is not an ideology of peace. Now, I recognize, first of all, that the majority of Muslims are peaceful. If they weren't, we'd be in a whole hell of a lot more trouble. Let's not gloss that over. Let's repeat that. If the majority of Muslims weren't peaceful, we'd have a lot more trouble on our hands. So I recognize that. I referenced Reza Aslan in a previous video. I've done a little bit more research on him, and a lot of his assertions about different countries, specifically female genital mutilation being an African problem, not a Muslim or Islam problem, is based on not even shaky data. It's based on no data. We could get into that, but I don't buy what he's selling. However, it's a reflection of reality, if I'm going to be an empiricist, that the majority of Muslims are peaceful. But the religion is not peaceful. To say that the terrorists are the one perverting the religion is a mistake. And I think it would do a lot towards getting people on the side of all the rest of the Muslims, the peaceful Muslims, if there was a recognition of the fact that really they're the ones perverting the language, or the religion. And that they choose to do so willingly out of a sense of, ethics, morality, and rational thought, and that sort of thing. That their divergence from their texts, their religious texts, are born out of those things. That would be quite helpful. The problem, of course, is that it would almost be a tacit admission that the religion, which is based on the texts, is flawed or completely false to begin with. And I'm not sure that kind of cognitive dissonance can exist in a person's head without actually just coming to the realization that their religion is BS and they need to become an atheist or something. And so that's problematic. Oh, there's that word. But I think it's necessary. Either the religion is based on the texts or it's not. And then we get to what the texts actually say. And so there you have it. Now, Christianity isn't much different. The difference is, of course, that there aren't a lot of sort of radicalized people running off and doing certain things in the name of Jesus Christ or God that are similar. But there are similar pronouncements in there. And I think the majority of Christians have really come to the point where they don't even know the texts that are the basis of their religion or their theology. But make no mistake, I think that there's a potential there. And again, that's when we need to call upon rationalists and empiricists to speak up and say, show me your work. You're going to have to show me how your religion is an accurate reflection of the nature of our existence. And if you can't, we're going to have to actually ask you to stop trying to push your ideology on us, even if it is in less violent forms, in terms of, again, gay and lesbian rights and other things, right? Other issues where there are religious challenges to a secular system of governance or law or whatever we agree to. Another thing that Obama talked about in his speech was that there has to be a recognition somehow of equality under the law, which doesn't exist. That's a strange thing to me to say when we certainly don't have it under ethnic or racial guidelines, right? If we had equality under the law, there wouldn't be any such thing as affirmative action. It may be a law that's attempting to alter what they see as a disparity, but you can't call it equality under the law. Or with regards to religious exemptions for different things. That's not equality under the law either. So to claim that there is. Similarly, he talked about somehow recognizing something to the effect that discrimination is not tolerated in these religions. I don't know where he gets that. I think what ends up happening, of course, is the majority of these leaders, the subject of religion itself is extremely touchy. And so nobody wants to say shit even if their mouth is full of it. And again, that's why rationalists and empiricists, I think, have to speak out. The dominant religions of today, in their texts, are highly discriminatory against certain people, either by their genetic or, their racial background or by their actions, which could be argued, I think, rationally and empirically, that actions that don't harm anybody else, that they're definitely discriminated against. Again, removing someone's head for apostasy, for instance, or something like that, a bit of a discriminating act. And so to talk about it as though there's no discrimination within the religions is to skirt an issue. Now, I realize it's a sensitive issue. However, we're not going to make any headway if we don't call a spade a spade. Most of these religions are highly discriminatory. That's the point. It's interesting to think too. I know I got into a little bit of a disagreement once recently with Live Life over whether or not our foreign policies have any impact on the resurgence of terrorism that we see. And I've said these things don't operate in a vacuum. There's a reason why they don't attack certain countries, but they do attack others, even if they're secular nations. And, we have a continued effort there. If you've ever read any of the books by, oh my goodness, I can't remember his name now, John Perkins, Economic Hitman is a portion of a title of one of his books. It's very interesting to note some of the divisive and very devious foreign policy that we've had that people aren't even actually all that aware of, but of course we're aware of a lot of it. And to imagine that couldn't somehow help people form radicalized ideas about the nature of us in a democratically elected country where, in other words, if our leaders are elected by us, then we essentially condone or endorse the actions of those leaders. It's part of the reason why I have refrained from voting in the past in federal elections, because I could not find someone's platform that I could endorse. I'm not going to put my virtue behind someone who's going to do something that I find not virtuous. And so, they view us in a certain way. Not to mention that our own intelligence agencies have talked about blowback. They're the ones who inform the elected officials about the ramifications of certain foreign policy. So there's not much point in hiring these guys, these specialized, highly trained people, if you're not going to take the advice that they give you just because it's inconvenient, because you want to maintain a narrative of we weren't at war with them, they were at war with us, which is baloney. Now, I'm not saying that it justifies any of the terrorist acts. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying two wrongs make a right, but you have to include that as part of the calculus. If you're going to be rational and empirical, if you're going to actually deal with facts on the ground, just as the way we would wish that a lot of these religious people would. And it shouldn't be forgotten, I was thinking about this the other day and I realized there was a lot of stuff got lost in the idea of weapons of mass destruction. And when it comes to the invasion of Iraq, and it was a phony, right? It was made up. And they spoke with certainty. So let's call a spade a spade. They were clearly lying because they couldn't have possibly had the intelligence. Because first of all, the intelligence they were given was the opposite of, right? Yellow cake and all that stuff from Niger, right? The intelligence they were given was the opposite of that. And of course, the results, the empirical evidence after Iraq was invaded wasn't that as well. But the one thing that gets forgotten about in a lot of that is that George W. Bush actually said that God had told him to invade. I would ask you, how is that any different from the jihadists operating under the dictates of Allah? How is it any different? I mean, it's only different, I guess, in the fact that here's a guy basically admitting to having voices in his head that impact millions and millions and millions of people. I remember watching The Fog of War by Robert McNamara. It was a documentary where he just basically talks about all of the conflicts that he was involved in. Very intelligent man, and I could tell from that documentary that he had a lot of remorse and a lot of regret over some of the things that happened. One of the things that he talked about was principles in war, and one is that proportionality should be some sort of a concept in war. And if that's the case, if proportionality should be, then we're due for a lot more terrorism. Based on the number of people, if in no other place than Iraq, first of all, people who share the same belief system or the same basic religion, the texts and that sort of thing, as some of the terrorists might do. Proportionality, let's keep that in mind. How many people were killed and displaced in Iraq for no good reason other than I made up claim about weapons of mass destruction and or a claim to have had a voice in the head telling someone to do so. Now, the scary thing about George Bush saying that God told him to invade Iraq is not just that, voices in the head and whatever, but is that he obviously probably made some sort of a mental calculation that this would be accepted by the people. In other words, if he did even have a voice in his head, but lived in a country where he knew that people would go, whoa, wait a minute, crazy man walking here, we don't support this, he probably wouldn't have said it. That's pretty scary as well. And again, I think religion is a major problem here. Deviating from rationality and empiricism is a problem. Obviously, radicalization is a problem, but the texts themselves are a root problem that needs to be addressed. And if people are going to say that they're perverting the faith, then we need to have an honest talk about that faith. And what are the people doing who don't take the texts to mean that? Their interpretation, as they say. And are they the ones who are actually deviating from the faith? And if they are, then we need to have an honest discussion about that, about what that actually means. And that includes the Christians, because there are some equally demonic things, I think, in the texts that they rely on, but may not have read. Sometimes that's the easiest way to make an atheist, they say, right? Is to take a believer and have them actually read their own Bible, cover to cover. So that's the long and short of this message, is that I was quite taken aback by some of the things that Obama said. And that's not even to mention the things like, here's what we're going to do. And then he names a bunch of stuff they were already doing. And then the things that they're going to do that are sort of like new, I guess, is to share more intelligence with our allies. Like why you wouldn't be doing that to its full extent. To me, that's the least expensive thing you could do, right? Like in a car, I'll just relate everything to automotive. In a car, they saved tens of pounds, if not hundreds of pounds of wiring once they put multiple computers within an automotive chassis. The Buick LeSabre of 2000 was GM's first foray into the connected car, you might call it. It's connected with itself. It's basically like a big internet, and you've got computers all over the place. And instead of running bundles and bundles of cabling to different areas of the car, you could just run a power wire, a ground wire, and a communication wire. And then you could have computers trading information back and forth, sharing sensor data and sharing computer messages so that one computer could just send a message to another computer, please do this at your locale. And then, of course, again, power and ground are available there for the computer to actuate whatever motor or whatever it is that it's to do. So it saved a lot of money and it saved a lot of weight and complexity in the vehicle substructure, the wiring. To me, sharing information is the least expensive thing that you could do. I'm not sure why that would be something that should be new. And then, of course, he mentioned something about people on no-fly lists shouldn't be able to get a gun. That's got its own issues. I would kind of agree with that. If you have people that are terror suspects, maybe they shouldn't have weaponry. But when it comes to terror, let's not forget, guns aren't necessary. Airplanes, readily accessible things that could be turned into pipe bombs, and other things can be used. But there's a problem with the no-fly list. There's a lot of people on there that really shouldn't be on there. It's a really crazy list. But this skirting around the issue of religion, I think, is a huge problem. And we're telling people that the wrong people are perverting the religion. That's a problem. We need to have honest discussions about that. I'm just not sure how well it's going to work because, again, I think this puts us into the realm of cognitive dissonance, pushing people into that cognitive dissonance when you have to actually challenge them on their faith. I don't know what the answer is, but those are some of the things that I've been thinking. Like I said, if I deem the other video worthy of upload, I'll do that. Let me know, as always, what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'm going to go eat.